What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? So, Devin Haney had his little fight against Linares the other day. And he did, he did his thing. He was trying to knock the kid out, Linares out. That obviously didn't work. He wanted to have that dramatic, that dramatic knockout, that dramatic moment, to kind of put everybody, I guess, quotes on notice, something that's going to go viral, something that's really going to get people hyped up and talking about him. And that was his focus. You saw the pre-fight videos, him, going hardcore with the hard shots. And, he wanted to really, just have something dramatic and spectacular happen in the fight. But it didn't necessarily work out that way. He still won. He won the fight. He dominated most of the fight. I did start to see, a few flaws in it. And I know most people are going to say, oh, he dominated the whole fight. But I said the same thing about Lubin as well before, and people said I was crazy, and I said Lubin's gonna get knocked the hell out, and people said I was crazy, and he got knocked the hell out. So I'm just saying, a couple of things that I saw in there, but for the most part though, he still did good, and which is not expected when you start stepping up in levels of competition. Things get more difficult. They're not necessarily as easy, but he still dominated the fight. But he did get clipped. He got clipped in one of the rounds. He got shook. I think if there was another minute or so in that round, I think he really would have been in trouble because Linares would have been able to capitalize on that punch that he landed. But, the round had ended, and there's been this big, huge focus on everybody saying that, no, you have to look at the entire fight. You have to look at the entire fight. He dominated the entire fight. It's what a lot of people are saying. Just due to the fact that there's a lot of people also who are focusing on the fact that he got rocked and he got hit and he got wobbled. And it's like there's this hardcore press, to say, no, we need to educate the fans and this is not the only thing that they can focus on because he dominated the fight. Well, they're going to critique that aspect of his fight, and everybody has been critiquing all these other fighters when it comes to their fights. I don't know how many times people have talked about Teofimo Lopez and that Katana fight. People always mention that fight when it pertains to him, and they talk about the issues and the problems he had in that fight. No one talks about the fact that he dominated pretty much the whole fight. No one talks about the fact that he was facing somebody that was substantially taller than him, rangy, had great movement in that fight, that fought really great, where he put him into a space where he really had to make adjustments. No one talks about anything about that. People talk about the issues that he had in that fight when they talk about other fighters and if they believe that, this other particular fighter can beat him. When it comes to Ryan Garcia against Campbell, no one talks about him getting up and beating the brakes out of Campbell and stopping him. Everybody always focuses on the fact that he did get dropped. No one says, hey, this is boxing. You can get dropped by anybody. It can happen. It's happened to the best of them. Look at Lennox Lewis. When he fought Rockman, he got clipped and he didn't get up. Ryan got up. And he handled his business, and he ended up stopping Campbell, something that Lomachenko couldn't do. No one talks about that fight like that. When it comes to Gervonta Tank Davis and the fight that he had against Gamboa, he won every round in that fight, almost every single, minute, almost every second in that fight. He beat the brakes out that guy, dropped him a whole bunch of times, and eventually ended up stopping him. But the only thing people focus on is like, oh, look at the shots he was getting hit with. Look at the shots he was getting hit with. Oh, Gamboa had this injury when he was, in the second round. And look how long he lasted. That's what everybody keeps talking about. And the reason they do that is because, these guys like the Four Horsemen. When you got Ryan, when you got Devin, when you got Teofimo, when you got Tank, Shakur's kind of coming up in there. And people also say, when he comes up to there. So because of that, every single fight that they have is going to be dissected. It's going to be looked at very, very closely. People are going to do this, and your negatives, people are going to talk about your negatives because they're looking at, can this other fighter take advantage of the negatives that we saw in the fight? And Devin does the same thing too. Because when these other fighters fight, Devin has something to say, about this fighter or that fighter. Like Devin, the whole purpose of him fighting against Gamboa was like he was going to show it how it's supposed to be done. That's another fight where he expected himself to knock that guy out. He expected to stop Gamboa. That didn't happen either. But then the talk was like, hey, but look how he boxed him. He didn't get touched the way Tank did. He didn't get touched the way Tank did. He left that fight flawless. Comparing again, so we can't You know, and we've seen his father do the same thing as well. You know, he's one of the top guys. He puts tweets out. He does interviews where he talks. So when you do that, and when your father's also doing that, the microscope's going to be under you. You know, and when you're saying you're going to do this, you're going to do that, that's going to be the expectation. You know, that's going to be the expectation. You know, when Keith Thurman was talking about, you know, we're going to burn money. We're going to burn money. You know, before the Bundu fight, he's going to make a statement against Bundu. You know, he's going to smash up Bundu, all this boxing and stuff. Now, we're going to stop this. We're going to show them, you know, what the fans really want to see. And then you go out there and you outbox Bundu for 12 rounds. You drop him once. You completely outdo him. But because of the things that you were saying and because of the expectation that everybody had, now your performance is it's lackluster. Because, you know, that's why you got booed in that fight. Because then all of a sudden, because of the things that you were saying, you know, you ended up not living up, you know, to what you said you wanted to be, you know, as it pertains to that particular fight. You know, so, you know, when things are said before fights, when it comes to Devin, yes, there's going to be talk. You know, Teofimo Lopez could go into his next fight, dominate the whole fight. He doesn't stop that dude, or he doesn't go, you know, or he has a moment or two in there where, you know, he gets shook or whatever. People are going to point to that. People are going to focus like, oh, man, that's happening to you. Imagine if you were in there against Tank. Imagine if you were in there against Tank. You getting stopped. You know, you getting stopped. That's what everybody was saying when it came to Ryan. You know, when he had the issue with Campbell, right? Oh, he's going to get stopped. He goes there against Tank, he's going to get stopped. No one's talking about him being resilient. No one's talking about him, you know, having a heart of a champion, peeling himself off that ground, you know, and ending up stopping Campbell, something that Lomachenko couldn't do. No one talked about that like that. So now when it comes to Devin, it can't change. Like, he's not above criticism. You know, he's one of those guys. He's one of those horsemen. He's also, quote, a quote promoter as well, who has fighters. You know, so there's going to be other things when it pertains to promotions and, you know, fighters that he fights where he's going to be critiqued when it pertains to that as well. Even though he's signed, you know, he's signed to Matchroom, but he still obviously does also have his promoter's license. He does have people who fight in the undercards who are signed to him, you know, who are signed to him as a promoter. So he's going to be critiqued, you know, and so, and people need to understand that and expect that, you know, and if he says certain things, you know, where he says he's going to do this or he's going to do that, and he doesn't succeed in that, people are going to talk. Gervonta Tank Davis handled his business against Santa Cruz, boxing and moving certain rounds, where he couldn't be touched by Santa Cruz when he was doing that. Other times, flat-footed, you know, hands up, just going, you know, going at Santa Cruz on purpose, flat-footed, not moving, because that man couldn't, you know, he couldn't hurt him. So he was choosing to do that. People have this weird thing like, oh, he was flat-footed because that's all he does. Go watch that fight again. He had rounds where he was boxing, and he had rounds where he was flat-footed. You know, he kept going back and forth. You don't have to look at the whole fight. Just look at the last two rounds. Okay, the previous round, he was boxing, moving, catching with clean shots, couldn't be touched. In the last round, stopped, pushed the pace, you know, got, you know, Santa Cruz thought he was doing something, boom, set him up and put him out. But all the people keep talking about is, oh, look at how he was, you know, look at how he was getting touched. He was getting touched. Imagine if he was in there against Devin. Imagine if he was there against Shakur. You know, even though neither one of those guys has fought anywhere near the level of a Santa Cruz or anywhere near a level of what the hell's that dude? Whatever that dude's name is that he fought. What the hell? I'm thinking Fortuna in my head for some weird reason. Pedraza. That's the name I'm thinking about. Pedraza. None of them fought anywhere near the level of competition. You know, but somehow all these guys can beat Tank. You know, guys are going 12 rounds. A lot of them, they wouldn't last 2-3 rounds against Tank. But somehow these guys going 12 rounds against all these guys, somehow we're going to be able to beat him. You know, so it is what it, you know, but it is what it is. You're allowed to have that opinion, though. You know, but just like you're allowed to have that opinion, people are also allowed to have the opinion, you know, when it comes to Devin. You know, I'm hearing people saying that, oh, Shakur Stevenson will beat Gervonta Tank Davis. Go look at Shakur Stevenson's last fight and look at Colbert's last fight. You know, there's a question if Shakur Stevenson can beat Colbert. Forget about, let alone Tank. You know, going all those 8, 9, 10, 12 rounds against guys that wouldn't go last 2 rounds against Tank. But somehow people believe that from what they see, Shakur can beat Tank. Even though we have seen nowhere near the level of competition that Tank has taken on. Nowhere near the level. but you're allowed to have that critique. You're allowed to do that critique. You're allowed to have that assumption, allowed to have that belief. That's cool. But at the same time, people also have the right to have that same belief when it comes to Devin. And they have the right to critique him when it pertains to just those particular points in the fight. That's what people are going to focus on. When it comes to all these fighters, people are going to focus on the blemishes that they have because they're comparing all these guys against each other. You know, so especially until they fight each other, people are going to consistently do that. They do that when it comes to, you know, Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. And we're talking about Errol Spence fighting way higher level competition than Terence Crawford. But whenever anything happens to Errol Spence, it's, oh man, you get touched like that. Imagine if Bud was in there with you. You know, imagine if Bud. No one cares that he won 12 rounds against Mikey Garcia. No one cares about the fact that he won all the rounds against Danny Garcia. No one cares about the fact that he ended up, you know, beating Sean Porter. Like, oh, look at the issues that he had. You know, oh, I'm not sure if you won that fight. But imagine if he was in there against Terence Crawford. You know, it's done in all the divisions, especially when it comes to guys that we want to see fight. You know, and these four dudes right here, with Shakur, you know, slowly slipping into the conversation, you know, people are going to look at the negatives of their fights. And they're going to focus on that. You know, and everybody has done this with all these fighters. So all of a sudden now we need to focus on him and on just his positives. And all of a sudden, oh, you know, well, we haven't seen this other guy, you know, fight this level of competition. So we don't know if that wouldn't happen to them against Pedraza. No. You can't switch the rules up all of a sudden. That's our grown ass man. He's also a promoter. And his father talks that ish, and he talks that ish. So, you know, there's gonna be times when you're gonna be criticized. And I'm sorry, when it comes to this particular situation, I don't see nothing wrong with the criticism that man is getting, at all. You know, but it doesn't mean he's not gonna be great. It doesn't mean that he won't beat all these other fighters. It doesn't mean none of that. That's why I never, you know, what I say is I'm gonna enjoy these guys' careers, and we'll see where they land. We see where they end up. You know, and I just watch them from fight to fight as far as anointing them and putting them as kings, as the king of the division, oh, the best in the world, when they haven't fought nowhere near top tier competition. I'm not doing that. You know, I'm not doing that. You know, because I would say when it came like with Lubin, I said the same thing. I was like, yeah, he's doing things and, you know, quote, styles makes fights. But when you step up your level of competition, doesn't mean you're going to be able to implement that same style against that level of competition. And when he stepped up against the king of the division, we saw what happened. Night and freaking day, you know. But, you know, congratulations to that dude. He did what he's supposed to do. He survived that moment, came out there with the victory like he's supposed to. And we'll see what the future holds, you know. But for now, like, subscribe, share. I'm out.